Hey guys, so as of the recording of this video, Blackboard is down, so I haven't been able to go in and look at your responses to the first week of stuff. So I will grade that as soon as I can. I can't get into Blackboard right now. So instead, what we'll do is I'm just going to do your first lecture about arts management. What is it? What's arts administration? All of that sounds really interesting to me, Professor Hanley. Me too. I think it's going to be fun. Probably not. This lady's crazy. All right, here we go. No, here's not where we go. Ha-ha. And then this. Ha-ha. All right, so what is arts management? If you have any guesses, you can write them, but I wouldn't guess now since, this is a recording. All right, so the nonprofit arts and culture sector is a $1.12 billion industry in the greater Houston region. That's the nonprofit arts and culture sector. That does not include any for-profit artists or independent artists. We support 25,817 full-time equivalent jobs. We generate $119.3 million in local and state government revenue. What do you think, so just for a second, think about what do you think the difference is between the $1.12 billion industry and the $119.3 million in local and state revenue? So just guess to yourself for a second. So the difference is that $1.12 billion goes into private industry, so that goes into the whole economy of Houston, and $119.3 million in local and state government revenue means taxes, right, for the most part. That's how much money we make specifically for the government. The other number is how much money we make for the whole of Houston. Okay? So what are the arts? Arts versus entertainment, right? So there's fine arts, there's cultural arts, there's art in the digital age. So what is art versus entertainment? So just think for yourself, just think to yourself for a second, what do you think the difference is between art and entertainment? You can shout at the computer, I'll pretend to hear you. Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, I like that one. Ooh, yeah. You guys, I'm sorry. I'm not really sorry. So my understanding, my definition, my personal definition is that entertainment and art are similar and that art is a kind of entertainment, but you can have whatever definition works for you. The book says, let's see if I can find it. The arts are generally defined as a set of activities involving creativity, divided into various disciplines. And when people talk about, quote unquote, the arts, they are most often talking about what we might define as the fine or high arts. So the fine or high arts, that's what? The opera, the symphony, the theater, right? The things that seem to be only for rich people, right? Rich white people. Boring. No, I'm just kidding. All art is important. And that's as opposed to mass-produced and widely distributed products like movies and recorded music and television, which are often classified as entertainment. And the line between arts and entertainment has traditionally looked something like the chart on page 2 of your book. But I think it's important to note that the researchers and people in the field are starting to define art more broadly, right? I'm sorry, my cat would like to be a part of us. So researchers and arts administrators are starting to define art more broadly. They're saying, film is art, movies are art. And this has implications on the way that we discuss the management, okay? All right, so arts participation research is led by the National Endowment for the Arts, right? The National Endowment for the Arts. And this is a federal agency that provides grants, research of the field, and other services in support of arts and culture. The National Endowment for the Arts separates its grants into these categories that you see on your screen. Artist communities, arts education, dance, design, folk and traditional arts, literature, local arts agencies, and so forth and so on. These are the ways that they define art, and sometimes as arts administrators, this is what we turn back to when we talk about how do we define art. So okay, so here's an interesting thing. On page 3 of your book, it says, arts participation has moved out of art-specific venues like concert halls and museums and into bookstores, community centers, homes, and city streets. Arts participation can be understood as occurring in multiple modes, sometimes overlapping. Arts attendance, personal creation, and perform and participation in the arts through electronic media. When the criteria for participation was expanded beyond attendance to include creating art and accessing the art via the internet and electronic media, it shows that 75% of Americans participate in art in some way. So for this class and in this book, we're going to use the broadest possible sense of the word art. This doesn't mean that we're advocating. So let me ask you to think about this sentence, okay? On page 3 of your book, it says, this does not mean, however, that anyone is advocating for a lower standard of quality in the arts. Instead, the conversation needs to be shifted a bit. Instead of centering the discussion on the difference between arts and entertainment, we can now concentrate on defining and promoting artistic quality wherever it may be found. Think about that statement and try to decide what it means to you, okay? Let me know what you think that means as we move through the course. All right, so after we define art, we have to define culture, right? So what is culture, right? So the word culture, the term, of course, implies the growth or improvement of something, right? As in, you've heard of horticulture, which is plants, like growing plants, I think. Yeah, haha, it is. And agriculture, which is the cultivation of animals and crops, right? So as plants, animals, and bacteria can be cultivated and improved, so can the human brain. So if you think about your brain as you would a farm, and the farm just runs your world, right? That would be what culture does. So culture is the definition of the habits, norms, and accumulated knowledge of a group of people. So this is songs, dances, writing, visual art, costumes, habits, tradition, history, food. All of this goes into your culture. So a lot of times, and I may have said this in the introduction video, but a lot of times we call someone a quote-unquote cultured person if they go to the museum and go to the theater and go to the opera. But in this class, we won't use that definition because it's derogatory. Everyone is a cultured person. Every person has culture within them. It's just everyone's definition of culture is different. For instance, even though I'm a red-haired, very pale person, I consider myself culturally Italian, right? I make spaghetti sauce from scratch. I make lasagna and I make fun of other people's lasagnas. That I'm culturally Italian, right? So the traditions, history, food, habits, songs, all of that, that is the definition of the accumulated knowledge of my group of people. And you can have many cultures. You don't have to subscribe to just one. All right, so what is arts management, right? So arts management is the management and organization of arts and cultural organizations of all kinds, whether for-profit or not-for-profit. What does that mean? What does that mean? The management and organization of arts and cultural organizations of all kinds, whether for-profit or not-for-profit. So it just means that there's lots of things that go into putting an organization together, right? And arts managers are the ones that keep the organization together. They're not necessarily the ones doing the art, although they might be, but they're the ones that organize everything and keep everything together and do the management of the art. So there's different types of arts management. There's cultural policy, which is like integrating with the government, right? There's arts advocacy, which is, advocating for things. So it's the attempt to change public and political conditions. There's arts entrepreneurship, which is the encouragement of growth of small arts businesses. There's just regular artist management, which is managing a certain career or promoting an individual. There's cultural planning, which is the process of working within communities to coordinate the growth and maintenance of arts and culture. That's what I do. I do cultural planning. Public art, that's things like maintaining a public art collection. So anything that belongs to the city actually belongs to the public. So maintaining public art would be maintaining the art project that belongs to the city and to the people within that city. You also have entertainment media management. This is a concentration on on for-profit arts activities like music and film. Community arts, this is the practice of engaging communities in culturally democratic, community-specific, and socially active arts and culture. Discipline-specific management, which is like museum management, performing arts management, and festival management. I'd like to know in your responses this week in your why can't I find the word? The word is in your discussion this week, let me know which type of art management sounds most interesting to you. Is it discipline-specific management? Are you an arts entrepreneur? Do you like public art? Is there one of these categories that you want to know more about? I'd like to know that. So this is kind of what arts management can be, okay? All right, so what are management functions? So we said, let's go back. Oh, that's not back. So we said the management and organization of arts and cultural organizations. So we're defining management with management, right? Which is like the worst way to define something ever. So what are management functions? So management functions, these are the things that go into an organization or go into managing a person. You have to think about marketing, think about fundraising, think about budgeting and financial management. You got to think about board relations. You got to think about management of staff and volunteers, so HR. You got to think about program planning and evaluation, and you got to think about education and outreach. You know, a lot of these things are not any different than what you would do if you had a for-profit business, so if you were just running a regular organization. But some of these things are specific to arts organizations. Some of them are specific to cultural organizations. Program planning and evaluation is a special thing. Education and outreach is something that's required by having a 501c3. That's a nonprofit designation. And it's specific to those kinds of organizations. So when we talk about arts managers, they're people who do some or all of these 7 things, right? Marketing, fundraising, budgeting and financial management, board relations. And we'll talk more about each and every one of these things as time goes on. But just so you get an idea of the way of what it is that management is doing. So who supports the arts, right? Who supports the arts in America? This comes down to these people. So it started with the government, right? The government gives money, religious institutions. These are all the kinds of people, places, things that can support art. What I want you to do is think about what it means when each of these things supports your art. Does it, do you lose a sense of control of some of your art? Does it affect the kind of things that you're able to produce? And I'd also like to know who you think is mostly supporting art right now. Wealthy citizens, the artists, the government, religious institutions, arts institutions. I'd like to know who you think is doing that. All right. So President John Adams said, "I must study politics and war, that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain." So I want you to think about that. So what is President Adams saying in that? He's saying that he has to fight. He's fighting for the right for his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren to be able to study painting and poetry and music and to be able to study the arts. And so you have to have a foundation as a society in those things in order to have a society worth fighting for. That is what he is saying in that text. So your discussion questions are in your book, right? They're at the back of your book. So I want you to respond to each of these views, right? In times of economic hardship, there are more important things to worry about than the arts. I'd like to know why you either agree or disagree with that. There are 4 things here. I want to know why you either agree or disagree with each one of them. And then John Adams' quote implies that he considered the presence of the arts a sign that America had reached the status of a civilized country. So what do you think about that? Do you think that art is what makes you a civilized country? Or do you think that art always exists, whether you're quote-unquote civilized or not, right? How would you define art and culture? We talked about some definitions that are in the book and the way that I define them. I'd like to know the way that you define them. And what characteristics do they share? How are they different? Come up with your own sort of idea of what that means. And then the last question is, how many of the forms of support for the arts that have been present throughout history still exist today, right? That's the question I asked you a little bit ago, which is, who do you think is supporting art at this moment? Who do you think is most supporting art at this moment? Are there other ways to support art at this moment? Those are all really good questions, and I'd like you to respond to each other in your discussion, and I'd like for you to really think about your answers. I'm looking forward to reading your discussion and your introduction to each other. This is Freya. Sorry, just so it doesn't look like I'm being weird. She always looks like that. She's grumpy. I hope that you guys got something from that lecture. I really hope that we can have a good discussion. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be around to answer them. Great. I will talk to you guys soon.